Hello everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Haas Team Podcast. My name is Brad Groux, and contrary to popular opinion, I am still alive. It's been a couple months since we've had a podcast episode, and it's been 4 races, and for that, I am very sorry. Real life came and kicked me right in the junk, and has been keeping me busy, and I haven't been able to record. But we're back to it. I'm going to pledge to record every Wednesday, and every Wednesday going forward, we will have new episodes recorded. And to make sure that happens, I'm actually recording on my brand new mobile setup. So I got a really nice digital recorder, really nice microphone to take, and I'm going to be able to record when I'm not at home as well. So that's why I think we're going to be able to stick to the schedule we have now. So without further ado, I don't want to waste too much of your time because I actually have to pack my bags because I am heading out in about T-minus 7 hours to the Canadian Grand Prix. That's right, I'm flying from Houston, Texas, where I live, to America's Hat, also known as Canada, to Quebec for the Canadian Grand Prix. I will be there all 3 days, and I will be roaming around the Canadian Grand Prix with my microphone, trying to interview fans. Fans of not only Haas, but new fans of F1, and just fans of F1 in general. And since I've missed 4 episodes, or 4 race episodes thus far, I owe you 4 episodes. And so I'm going to release some interview-type episodes to talk to fans and get their feelings on how the season's going and that sort of thing. So if you see me, I will be in a Haas Team Podcast shirt. I will be handing out Haas Team Podcast cards. I'll even have a small little sign saying Haas Team Podcast fan interviews. If you see me around the circuit, come on by and say hi to Brad, and I will see if we can get some sound bites from you to have on our next podcast. And I may actually be able to publish some of this whenever I'm actually in Canada. If not, it'll definitely be published by next Wednesday. The post-race episodes will always be on Wednesday. That will give me some time to break down all the tapes and then look at all the news and post-race news and things like that, and to actually comment on those. And so going forward, I promise, guys, hold me to it. Hit me up at Brad Groux on Twitter if I don't do it. Where's the episode, you loser? I have no excuses now because I have a mobile recording setup. I'm actually at home sitting in front of my computer, but I'm to get myself in the mode of holding a microphone and talking into it because I'm going to be doing it all weekend. I'm doing it now. I'm not able to edit, and I'm able to do things really, really quickly. I will do some minor edits whenever I mess up really, really quickly, but for the most part, I think I'm just going to roll with it. So without further ado, guys, we'll get more into the Canadian Grand Prix, my weekend plans and things like that, but let's get us caught up. All right, so it's been kind of a rocky start to the season for Haas, the Haas F1 team. There's been some ups, there's been some downs, but things may be looking up, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But let's get caught up on the 4 races that we've missed. And that starts with the Chinese Grand Prix, race 1000. And in that race, Romain Grosjean finished P11th, and he qualified P10th, and Kevin Magnussen finished P13th, and he qualified P9th. And there's nothing really to say about this because I think we're all fans that have probably been paying close attention that they've been having issues with the tire temperatures on the car setup, and the Chinese Grand Prix was one of the worst, only followed by the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, race 1001. Kevin Magnussen qualified P13 and finished P13, and Grosjean qualified P15, and he actually did not finish. And we're nearly 30% through the season, and having missed these 4 races, these are the 2 races that I don't even want to waste time on. The cars weren't set up well. The drivers didn't even have a chance to do their jobs well. And I just don't want to linger on these 2 because it was just a disaster from the start to finish for the team in general. And the fact that they struggled in qualifying really shows that because the cars are pretty good in qualifying even whenever they have issues with tires. So that brings us with the Spanish Grand Prix. The Spanish Grand Prix, there was a couple weeks off, and so the teams brought some minor upgrades to the Spanish Grand Prix. And Haas and Dallara had worked together to create some great aero improvements for the car that seemed to alleviate and or fix most, if not all, of the tire heat issues. And that showed up in qualifying, where they qualified P7 and P8 respectively. Grosjean P7, Magnussen P8. And they finished the race P7 for Magnussen, P10 for Grosjean. Like I said, the team brought a plethora of aero upgrades to the track for the race, and after the race there was in-season testing. And during the first day of practice, the drivers drove different cars. So I believe it was Grosjean drove the new upgrades and Magnussen drove the old, so they can kind of compare and contrast. But for the remainder of the weekend, they ran the same aero upgrades. And like I said, the upgrades seemed to make a huge difference. The dreaded tire temperature issues seemed to at least be alleviated, if not solved. There was some debate in the race regarding a little incident between K-Mag and Kevin Grosjean, including K-Mag and Romain Grosjean, with Grosjean sitting P7 and K-Mag sitting P8. They actually touched, and there was an incident, and it was got kind of heated discussion between myself and some other Haas fans, and so I don't really want to get into that, mainly because it's two races ago, and there's really no point in like beating a dead horse. We've kind of discussed it on Reddit and on Twitter about as much as we can. My point was and continues to be that the team lost points that day. On a race where they could have finished P7th and P8, they finished P7th and P10th. And those points are very crucial, as we'll get down and we'll see in the constructor standings. And like I said, we can argue the semantics all day long, but the cold hard facts are, and as I said early on and many times throughout this podcast, the goal of this team is to finish P4 in the constructor standings. And they will not do that if and when they leave points on the track. And that's what was so frustrating about the Spanish Grand Prix. They should have finished P7, P8, clearly the best of the rest. But they finished P7, P10, and they gave up some points to their rivals who have now passed them quite handily in the constructor standings. We'll get back to that. Again, we can argue the semantics all we want. I'm going to look at it always from a team perspective. I know that we have fans from who follow the drivers, and that's fantastic. I'm glad you guys listen. But please know that this is Haas Team Podcast, and everything I'm going to say and do and talk about is the health of the team. The drivers come and go, but the team remains, is basically my stance on that. I love K-Mag. I love Grosjean. If and when they leave, I'll be sad to see them go, and they'll always have a special place in my heart. But at the end of the day, I am a Haas Team fan. And so anytime the team loses points, whether one of the drivers gains and one of the drivers loses, whether one's at fault or not, I don't care. I want them to maximize on their points. Simple as that. And I understand that some people want their driver to maximize on points too, and that's just a difference of opinions of who or why you're watching the sport. And that's fine. We can agree to disagree there. Either way, the Spanish Grand Prix was a great weekend for the team and easily the best weekend of the year for the team. Grosjean finally scored some points. Well, finally scored a point and got off the snide, and he finally was able to finish a race in the top 10. And before that, the only race he had finished was the Chinese Grand Prix. So by no fault of his own, none of his DNFs have been his fault, really. So poor guy, just bad luck. But he's been making a comeback slowly but surely these last couple races. And so that brings us to the Monaco Grand Prix, which the Monaco Grand Prix is one of the most frustrating races in the season because everybody loves Monaco because the girls in bikinis and the big boats and the water and the tunnel. But at the end of the day, it's a terrible race. It's not a race. It's literally a train. There's no way to pass. Slower cars win all the time. And that just kind of really sucked because Kevin Magnussen drove his butt off in qualifying, and he did an extremely good job in qualifying, and it ended up getting nothing out of it. And that just really sucks. That really sucks for him, really sucks for the team. You know, the qualifying started with a bang. K-Mag qualified P6, and he moved up to the third row to start P5 behind Sebastian Vettel because of a penalty on Gasly. But it all went down quickly from there because Monaco's got a Monaco. At the start, K-Mag lost a spot to Ricardo Renault to start the race, and the Avocado began a snail's pace to back the midfield up by more than 15 seconds after just a handful of laps. So my guess is that what the Renault drivers were doing were trying to back up the pace to get Hülkenberg a chance at the top 10. That really sucked because there was nothing that K-Mag could do. He was on the bumper of Ricardo, and there's just nothing he could do. Then just 10 laps in, the safety car comes out, which leads to not 8 of the 10 teams pitting. The only teams that did not pit were Toro Rosso and McLaren, and they both made out like bandits. After his pit, Kevin was stuck behind the slower midfield cars, and disaster struck once more when Kimi slowed down the pace of the back half of the midfield to a crawl for nearly 10 laps with gearbox-related issues. At least that's what they said on the radio. By the time Kevin had a chance to run again, he was well outside the pit window of the Toro Rossos and McLarens in front of him, basically ruining his day. In the end, you can't really fault the team for trying to get a free pit stop under the safety car, and they also answered Renault's pits because both Renault cars pitted at the same time, and the Renault was in front of them, and so they tried to stay with the Renault in front of them. But you know, hindsight is 2020. It was only 10 laps in, and Grosjean drove his butt off on his red tires, went 51 laps, I believe, and nobody thought that they could go that far. And they did go that far, mostly because of the snail pace of that race, but they went that far. And if K-Mag would not have pit, he would have finished P6. Easy P6 if he would not have pit then. But hindsight's 2020. You see a yellow flag, you see a safety car, you see a free pit, and it just didn't work out that way. And it really, really sucked for K-Mag, and I felt really bad. But what hurt him helped Grosjean, because Grosjean, again, did not pit, and all of those cars that did pit were stuck behind him and the rest of the other midfield. And he was able to make up quite a few spots, and he held that off until the end. He was actually sitting P8 with a handful of laps to go, and he was passed. And then he finished P9, but had a 5-second penalty for barely, and I mean barely, crossing the pit exit line at Monaco. And so the pit exit line at Monaco kind of hugs a wall as they turn, and it's quite a long way to have a yellow line, and he just barely passed it, and they docked him 5 seconds, which cost him a place, and it nearly cost him a point, because the 11th place car almost caught up to him as well. But at the end of the day, he scored a point. The team scored a point. He finished P10. Magnussen finished P14. Monaco's Monaco. I hate that race. That's one of the top races I want to go to, just because it's freaking Monaco, with the gambling and the girls and the Ritz and the all that stuff and the beauty of the scenery, but it's just not a good race. The cars are way too wide now. The new F1 body cars are just so wide. There's no way that you can really pass on that. You just can't. We saw it. Charles Leclerc tried to pass to make up spots as he was in the back, because he got screwed in qualifying by Ferrari, and he was out of the race before 20 laps. And that's just how it is at Monaco. It's just impossible. Almost impossible to lap. It just is. Unless the other person in front of you makes a huge mistake and leaves a wide opening, or you have a much, much, much more superior car. But for the most part, the midfield was backed all the way up, because whoever was sitting P7 was always backing up the pack, so their other drivers could have a chance at the points in the top 10. So, and that's exactly what happened. Renault actually screwed themselves, although Ricciardo made his way back into the points. They just kind of screwed themselves out of points, and it just didn't really make any sense to me. And I don't know. It's just, Monaco's just so frustrating. And everybody can look and say, oh, they made the wrong call to pit K-Mag. I get it. I totally get it, because it just flat out didn't work. But they answered the call of 7 of the other teams. So again, 8 of the teams pit at that time, and some of them pit both of their cars. Both lead teams pit both of their cars. So it's really hard to fault them on that, and it's just kind of like bad luck. And at the end of the day, if K-Mag stays up there, Grosjean doesn't make it to P10 probably. Obviously, you would prefer a P6 over a P10 finish for the team, but it's just, oh man, they haven't been able to put together a whole race. They've had one double points finish at this point through 6 races, even though that they've made it through qualifying. Both cars have made it through qualifying to Q3 4 times. So they just haven't been able to maximize on the points. Meanwhile, the other midfield teams are really surprising, and that's kind of where we're going to go from here. We're going to talk about just an overview of the best of the rest. And right, so the driver's standings, Kevin Magnussen sits P8 in the driver's standing at the moment, 4 points behind Sainz of McLaren in P7. P7 would be best of the rest, because it's the Mercedes, Ferraris, Red Bulls. Or at this point, it's almost Mercedes, Red Bulls, Ferraris. Ferraris is shit in the bed this year. Why, I don't know. And we could be saying we're having a bad year, but Ferrari, wow, what's going on there? Anyways, so K-Mag's doing pretty good, sitting P8, within striking distance of P7, where I know he wants to be. He wants that more than anything, because he wants to be the best of the rest and show that he deserves a drive in another car. And Romain Grosjean, with his 2 1-point finishes, now sits with 2 points in P17. But he's just a handful of points away from top 12. I think it's 4 or 5 points, and he's automatically in top 12. So that gets at the constructor standings. Constructor standings are Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, Racing Point, Haas, Toro Rosso, Renault, Alfa Romeo, and Williams. And Haas sits P6 with 16 points. Racing Point is right in front of them, P5 with 17 points, and McLaren sits way ahead of them in P4 with 30 points. But the midfield is as tight as ever. Only 4 points separate 5th through 9th place in the constructor standings. That's insane. So Alfa Romeo sitting in P9 and the Constructors has 13 points, and Haas has 16 at P6, and Racing Point has 17 at P5. So the midfield, again, like I said, and kind of like why I was so upset by the Spanish Grand Prix, they just can't leave points on the track. And I just felt like that was a waste. That was just a waste of effort. I know they finished double points, and it's still a good weekend. It's still a lot to be happy. But at the end of the season, whenever they're tallying up those points and that difference of $30 or $40 million between P5 and P4, that's a huge deal for a team. It's a huge deal for a midfield team. So I just hope that doesn't come back to bite them. Hopefully they're able to, with the new power unit and the new aero, that they're able to rock and roll and get back to Haas of old and just double Q3, double points, double Q3, double points. They're not, and McLaren is 14 points ahead of them right now for P4 in the Constructors, but that's nowhere. I mean, that's nothing. That's a couple of races of good results and a couple of races of bad results for McLaren. Like, it could easily be flipped the other way. So I'm not being a Chicken Little right now by any stretch of the imagination. So it's going to be really, really tight. It's going to be really, really tight. And so that kind of gets us to where we are now. The Canadian Grand Prix. Like I said, I will be heading to Montreal on a jet plane in about 10 hours. I read my watch wrong earlier. About 10 hours, I will be on the plane to Canada. Oh, Canada. So I will be in Canada, and I hope to see many of you there. If you're in the Montreal area and want to meet up for a beer, or want to meet up to talk, or to be interviewed or something like that, hit me up on Twitter at BRADGROUX. That's at Brad Groux, or at Haas Team Podcast. I will be monitoring and posting all weekend on the Haas Team social media, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, which are all Haas Team Podcast, all one word, and also on my own personal Twitter. So if you want to meet up, if you're there and want to say, hey, we want to meet up and say, you're an idiot, your opinions are wrong, I'm down. I love to debate. Let's do it. Let's do it, damn it. So with that said, let's talk about what we can expect from the Canadian Grand Prix. Hopes are high for the team this weekend. Like I said, they're coming in with basically a fully upgraded car, both aero and motor upgrades. And they've had the motor upgrades in Monaco, but Monaco is not a track where you can use those. But we saw the speed that could happen with K-Mag qualifying P6. And so the goal for team each and every week will be putting both cars in Q3, finishing with both cars in points. So Q3, top 10, Q3, top 10, Q3, top 10. Rinse, repeat every week. That's the goal. So with that said, let's just take a moment to just go through some quotes. Again, I don't have any recordings right now just because I am just getting the hang of this mobile recording thing, but I will get back to splicing samples and stuff from the team radios and stuff like that into future podcast episodes. This is just kind of a catch-up podcast episode, and I want to get it done as soon as possible so I can finish packing and get my dog squared away and start heading to the airport. And we'll actually get some sleep first and then head to the airport. So let's just get some quotes from the team before for what can kind of be expected from the Canadian Grand Prix and the season going forward. And so Kevin Magnussen said, it was good to try the new engine. It looks like it's a bit better and a good upgrade. Let's see how it goes in Montreal with the longer straights. We're making progress in all areas. I still think we've got the fastest car of the midfield, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. So Kevin we kind of all know that they have the fastest car. They just haven't been able to put it together. Like, we're waiting for them to have that perfect weekend, right? Where they just rock and roll. And it's happened like 1 or 2 weekends of the last 2 seasons. Both, like the last 2 seasons they've had it where they just rock and roll and they go P7, P8, P7, P8, or P6, P6, P7, P6, P7. So that's what we're hoping for. That will get them right back in the P4 constructor standings race. And so that's all it really takes. And that's what's happened with McLaren. McLaren's had a couple of good weekends in a row. And they've had steady points from their teammates. And so that's just kind of, Sainz has earned them 18 points. And young gun and fellow Redditor, Lando Norris, coming in strong and holding his own with 12 total points. That's just phenomenal from a rookie. So congrats, Lando. I like him. He's a good kid. But he's for the devil. He races for the devil, McLaren. So let's see what Romain Grosjean had to say. He says, the midfield this year is super, super tight. We've discussed that. That was my... 0.3 of a second in qualifying can put you in P6 or P7 or even P15. It's very exciting. It's a good challenge for the drivers. You're pushing to the limit all the time. Push it to the limit, yeah. I think it would be nice if we were fighting for the win or for pole position, but obviously the big teams are a bit too far ahead. Like, why even mention that, Grosjean? That just hurts. We've got the potential of getting fourth place. I'm going to finish the quote. He says, I think we've got potential to getting fourth place, but we need to put everything together. Stop the small mistakes and get those points going. I'm looking forward to being in Canada. I agree with pretty much everything he said. I'm guessing he said we've got the potential of getting to fourth place for the constructors. I'm just going to put that out there. They do have a chance to finish fourth place, and they're maybe even getting as outside it is maybe they even give it a podium. I mean, just think if Kevin Magnussen gets off to a good start at the Monaco Grand Prix, is sitting P5, and then some chaos happens in front of them, two of the top four cars hit each other, boom. That race is the perfect race for that to happen because it's a tight fit. And B, once he gets ahead, it doesn't really matter if the car behind him is much, much faster, or the drivers, but it's impossible to pass on that track. And so I'm hoping at some point within the near future, hopefully this season, that they'll get their first podium as a team. And I think it's possible as long as they're sitting P6, P7, the top best of the rest, because Gasly's going to continue to struggle some. We've seen Leclerc and Ferrari struggle, make boneheaded mistakes. The possibility is certainly there where, some of the top three teams' drivers just aren't going to be there, whether it's, just boneheaded mistakes and they have a wreck or something like that. So I think a podium's not out of the question for the season, but it is going to take, all the balls to fall in the right place for them, and hopefully it does, because they've been at the bad end of some luck stick. So let's hope that they get hit with the good luck stick going forward. So let's go with the final quote. Gunther Steiner says, the performance of the new engine was very good, and Canada will really see how much better the engine is. We're hoping it's a good boost and doing what it should be doing. And he says, as far as the team, how close everything is, he goes, everybody's close together. Even fourth place is not far away, because if one team has a good result with both cars going, it's easy to move up to fourth. Everything is very tight, especially between 5th and 9th. I think it's good for the championship. This has happened mainly because everybody struggled at one stage so far. And he's right. So not every team is run perfectly except for Mercedes. Every team's made some boneheaded mistakes at some point. At least some of them are their drivers. McLaren has definitely done the best of the rest, mainly because Sainz has been driving his butt off, but also because the kid Lando had a couple of great races. I think Lando may fall off a little bit over the year, but we'll see. They don't have the fastest car. That's the frustrating part. We really do think that Haas, I think most people agree that Haas shines in qualifying, and it's just making it show up on race day and making it happen. And it's going to just take a little time, I think, to get there and for them to learn to win as a team. And hopefully it happens before McLaren runs it off with a big lead in the P4 constructor standings, because I would really like to cheer for that fight all year round, or for the rest of the season. Again, we're only 6 races in. We're only 28%. I actually did the calculations. It's not even 30%. We're 28.4% or something like that end of the season. So there's still plenty of time left. There's still plenty of time left. A lot of teams have new upgrades to their cars as well. Sometimes they don't work out like they think they will, and so things can happen. Renault, look at Renault. Renault's fallen off the freaking map. They're not that far behind Haas right now in points, but at the same time, we thought they would be where McLaren is, and they're nowhere even close. Nico Hülkenberg has had an abysmal start to his season so far, but that's a good thing. So Renault. Suck it, Renault. So I think, that kind of gives us, an overview for the Canadian Grand Prix. Obviously they want to hit Q3 for both cars in qualifying. There's some long straights on the Canadian Grand Prix track. I think they can make some great times and do some great things, and let's hope that, this will be my first live F1 race. I have never actually gone to an F1 race live. I live in Houston, and the one in Austin's been there for several years now, but I just haven't been able to do it because of work or schedule or something like that. But so now I'm going to the Canadian Grand Prix, and I hope to see you there. And if you're not there, that's all right too. But I hope you tune in, and I hope you hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook and let us know, ask questions, give us feedback, do whatever you'd like to do. Tell me I'm stupid for taking a couple months off, but we're going to get back to work, and hopefully that's a good sign for Haas, and they start doing well. And I definitely will want to keep going with this podcast. I will continue with the podcast regardless, but it just makes it much, much easier to do the podcast when they're doing well. You know what I mean? Can you imagine doing like a Ferrari podcast right now? Oh, that would be a nightmare. Oh, they beat us again. And it's but our own damn fault. So sorry to get sidetracked there, but like I said, we're going back to the new episodes being recorded every Wednesday. I'm going to try to have them released every Wednesday, but the recordings with taking the snippets and stuff from the team radios and stuff, sometimes it takes me 10, 12 hours to record an episode. And if I get done recording at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, it obviously won't be out till Thursday, but I will record every Wednesday. I'll try to get some prep work done before that, but I will record every Wednesday. So we'll get an episode every Wednesday or Thursday. I can't promise just because it depends on what happens that week. It just may take longer to edit. There may be more stuff on the radio. Sometimes the onboard radios are really chatty. Sometimes they're not. So we'll see how it goes. But every Wednesday I will record. And that's why I dropped like $600 on this recording equipment so we can bring this to you every week. And like I said, I will be at the Canadian Grand Prix. If you're going to the Canadian Grand Prix, please hit me up on Twitter at Brad Groux or at Haas Team Podcast. Or I will actually be making a post on the Haas F1 Team subreddit about me heading to the Canadian Grand Prix. Reply there as well if you want to meet up, if you want to talk, if you want to be interviewed, if you want to just say what's up, if you want to buy me a beer. Sounds good to me. Just let me know because this will be my first experience. I'm actually flying solo. My buddy had to back out because of family stuff at the last minute, so I'm flying solo. And I am planning to also go to the Mexican Grand Prix and the American Grand Prix this year. I had planned to go to the Italian Grand Prix, but I figured it's probably best just to do all 3 North America Grand Prix because it'll be much cheaper this year. And then for next year, I will plan to take at least 2 or 3 Grand Prix next year into Europe. So Europe and or Asia. So look for that. And we're also looking for other people who want to maybe head out and interview at Grand Prix we can't make it to. You know, we're working on a shoestring budget here, so we're looking for volunteers. If you'd like to volunteer, hit us up on Twitter at Haas Team Podcast and let us know. So without further ado, I'll want to always remind you to be sure to join the Haas F1 Team subreddit. There are nearly 1,100 Haas F1 Team fans chatting on the subreddit at any given time. Well, there's that many people subscribed, not that many people chatting at any given time. But there's race day threads, and there's threads for qualifying and threads for the race day and then post-race discussion. So if you want to discuss with your fellow fans on qualifying, race day, and post-day discussion, go for it as well. Some of the guys also run a Discord server that actually they do Discord chat. So Discord's like instant chat. Some of you know what that is. If you know what that is, then I don't know why I'm explaining it to you. But Discord is just an instant chat server that is also, they have a Haas F1 on the Haas F1 subreddit. They have it on there. So join in on that. Again, follow Haas Team Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And then please tell one friend about the Haas Team Podcast. And I promise you, I won't let you down. I will have new episodes next week. And maybe, just maybe, depending on how many people I can get interviewed this weekend, I may push out some special interview episodes to make up for those lost episodes we didn't have earlier this year and get that out to you. So I look forward to seeing you all there. I look forward to Haas having a great weekend in Canada. I'm looking forward to spending some time in Quebec and meeting some French people and finding out where my family's from. I actually found out where my Airbnb is just outside of Montreal is just 5 miles away from where my great-great-great-grandfather was born. So I'm going to check that out while I'm up there. My family was from Quebec in the early 1800s. And so I thought that was kind of cool. And without further ado, I think I'm going to blow this popsicle stand, get packed up, take a quick nap, drop my puppies off at where they're getting taken care of, and then I am hopping on a jet plane to Canada. Until next time, guys, remember, Nico, we haven't forgotten about you.
Check my bolts, man.